The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast, a weekly media commentary talking about traditional and digital media headlines and talking to the content creators out front and behind the scenes. Here is the King of Podcasts. We're off and running with another Broadcasters Podcast. Thanks for being here. Subscribing to the show as you always do. And if you've been noticing the last few weeks I've been doing the show, I wanted to do a little tweaking of how the format goes. I don't want to just stay so serious in business, but I think there's some times where, as a broadcaster, we got to talk about things of people that are broadcasting, whether it's music, movies, TV, and radio, and how it really affects pop culture or affects the mainstream culture and the counterculture whenever that comes to light. And someone that came really kind of obscurity as a Disney Channel star and moving up to pop stardom like Olivia Rodrigo has done, well, she's been a topic of conversation this week because of interpolation. So in the music that she's done, this is something that's a common thing, by the way. Before we get into the whole story about how she now credited artists like Paramore with interpolation and properly giving credit to said artists on her new album Sour, which has sold over 2 million copies, by the way, wanted to go ahead and do that to give credit for the inspirations that brought her to the music career that she has right now, that she is relishing in only 9 months, because it was all of a sudden January, we hear Driver's License hit #1 for 8 weeks, and then a whirlwind of songs after that, Deja Vu, Good For You, and then the album comes out and has been tremendous. And it's done very well for her. And, when somebody comes off the bat, when you're looking at artists that are kind of doing the same old, or you're seeing artists that are, just kind of taking the same formula and just retweaking it, there's something different about Olivia Rodrigo. Of course, there have been comparisons to maybe what she does that would be a little similar to other pop stars like Taylor Swift, Lorde, Billie Eilish, and others, right? And Hayley Williams from Paramore. Things like that. We're hearing all that all the time. And some artists used to go ahead and not interpolate, but basically just cover songs. When I think about artists that covered songs completely and just did it in their own style, you think about Michael Bolton or Linda Ronstadt, 80s and 70s respectively. And you look at what they did. And you look at interpolation when it comes to, say, like a Bruno Mars. I mean, he feels like there's a lot where he kind of adapts from Michael Jackson. Chris Brown the same way. There's some artists that kind of just have a feel like they sound like they have something that comes from somebody else. And I haven't heard a lot of these artists get to the point where they need to be interpolating, so offering credits. This is kind of another form of kind of almost like somebody getting successful so quick, so fast, and artists that, they feel, the artists that are up these days, that look at Olivia Rodrigo and that they're the same age as her, 18 years old. And they're saying to themselves, well, why can't I do that? I mean, what's wrong with what my voice is or what I can do? I mean, she got the breaks of being a Disney Channel, working with, Daniel Nigro and working the albums and getting all these great, session players and other people to go and help produce her record. Sure, she's got quite a few advantages there. And, the whole talk about how, some of the organics are coming from a breakup and how that really fueled this album Sour that she did, which has a lot of great songs. I really like a lot of them. So, yeah, Driver's License, Good For You, Brutal, Jealousy. A lot of great songs. It's definitely for a younger audience, but I can appreciate what she's doing. It's a good pop album. What can I say? Just like what Taylor Swift would put out or what others would put out. That's what it is. So there's sampling, which a lot of artists do as producers, pick an artist that they'll take something that's a little bit of a hook or a little bit of a snare or something else, or just a clip, a sample that'll get taken. I mean, hip-hop artists, that was the livelihood of the 80s and 90s up to now. And that happens across the board. So the fact that this comes here and she gets so popular so fast and becomes so successful, well, now she has to pay her dues. It's like, okay, she's in the system. And it's not so much her peers that are calling her out. It's people that are not her fans, the haters on social media. The torches are out from the cancel culture crowd. It's kind of like that. That's what happened here. So we have that story to talk about, and I'm going to go ahead and get into right now and what has happened as a result. And then I want to go ahead and talk about movies. We got a lot of delays in movies right now with Top Gun Maverick, Mission Impossible 7 now are delaying their movies. And we're having to see what happens with other movies down the line if they're also going to follow suit, because the COVID cases are of concern. And so some people are going to be talking about that. Vice Media raising money, trying to go ahead and avoid, getting into a SPAC, trying to get into some, convert an investment into a company that they get, that's going to be traded, and they're going to be part of a publicly traded company. And then not want to get, trying to go crowdfunding to try to keep control of themselves, try to keep control of who they're going to be. Then we also got how the pandemic has sort of changed the way that we consume news, and the Nielsens. So television and the rating system that has been put in place for decades, and now how it's under fire, and the credibility is being put out there by the likes of the Media Rating Council. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So the fun stuff, the real good, the stuff that you want to go and hear about when it comes to, like, if you're into music, TV, and radio, the pop culture side, the fun consumer side, that will start off now your Broadcasters podcast each week, as much as I can do it, unless there's something else that takes focus. And then the more of the business stuff comes in later on. So I will put it in priority of, okay, what's fun and sexy and exciting to what becomes more business-like that people might want to stick around and listen to. So I'm giving it to you like that in 60 minutes, and hopefully you'll like it. And so far, it's been working better, and I think people kind of consume it that way. So you're getting a little bit of that. And there's the thing. If there are people that are going to come in here, listen to what I say about BTS or OnlyFans or, TikTok and things like that, sure. You want to stick around for a little bit of that and you drop off, that's okay. At least you're listening. And for those in the industry, you get to enjoy the best of both. So I hope you enjoy that and see where I'm coming with that. It's my way of kind of branching out and, casting a wider net to people, because I have comments I say about that, and sometimes I will put them on When I'm Not Podcasting series. But, sometimes I just think like I go and bring it up on this show. I feel like those are some of the stories I would bring up there. But since they do pretty well when I talk about them, I figured when it's necessary and it fits good with the format of the show, I'll bring them into this show. So the BTS of the chart manipulation was a good way to go. People responded well to it. And then when I did OnlyFans, another thing that also got responded really well. All those kind of things work out. So there's a reason for the madness of what I'm doing here with the show. I continue to learn about this show. I know what I want to talk about. And now it's just trying to get the audience to also want to feel like they're compelled to go ahead and stick around and listen to the whole thing. Like, what podcasters should not want to do that? I want to make every minute of every hour that you listen to this show important and something you want to listen to. I'm not putting in fluff. I'm not trying to put out anything. I'm trying to inject some of my own experiences, my own analysis and thinking and thought process into this. These are the kind of things I like to do. So that's what I'm here for. That's how I like to put this out. So let's go into the story of Olivia Rodrigo, because I think this is important. Billboard put a good story out that really kind of explained a lot, because the reason that this interpolation issue is so important because she's going to lose millions in publishing royalties as a result of this. So in the story itself, Kristen Robinson at Billboard writes, and it says now, she has given credits to Taylor Swift, Hayley Williams, and others. And here's what we got. So now, Olivia Rodrigo hasn't been shy about sharing her musical influences on her Billboard Top 200 topping debut album Sour, and since its release. Last week, Olivia Rodrigo retroactively added Paramore's Hayley Williams and Joshua Farrow to the songwriting credits for Good For You due to an interpolation of the band's Misery Business, which hit number 28 on the Hot 100 chart in January 2008. The second time since Sour's release that the 18-year-old Rodrigo had added writing splits on her songs due to similarities between her work and other previously released songs. People have been putting similarities to her music anyway, because they feel like, well, this is a pop star. They're just, kind of taking copycat. They're just taking ideas and working with it, which happened all the time. A lot of pop stars did that. I mean, are we going to go back and go talk to Pat Boone for recreating every kind of song that was a soul song and reinterpreting it for white audiences? We're going to go after that? I mean, we're going to go after, every artist that's been a pop star that just decided, let's just take another song and just rework it or just cover it. I mean, yeah, the royalties are one thing, but what's happening is there's a lot of this song, it sounds like this song. This song sounds like this song. We're just going to keep doing that. So fans have also gone after. Now, here's the other thing. Okay. So one of her songs is One Step Forward, Three Steps Back. And Taylor Swift and Jack Antonoff have been giving writing credits on the album cut before Sour's release for the song similarities with Swift's 2017 Reputation track, New Year's Day. The next song they want to go after is Brutal, which is one of the, hopefully will be a single that comes up. Right? I believe that is the next single they're trying to go ahead and pump up right now. Or actually Traitor is. And then hopefully Brutal and Jealousy, Jealousy follow that in the singles run as they push the radio. Brutal, they say, is similar to Elvis Costello's 1978 hit Pump It Up. And here's what happens. Elvis Costello actually responded back to the fact that his song Pump, which was a great song, by the way. Elvis Costello and the attraction, I at one point really didn't get into that group as much, but watching, what really got me interested in them, into Elvis Costello a little bit, was watching what was the 1979 story of Top of the Pops. And they went through the whole story of him, the angry white nerd, and just the songs that he did, and really appreciating his music and just what he did. Oliver's Army, what a song. And the story that was told behind it, kind of a political message. That song, Pump It Up, Veronica, there's a whole lot of stuff. Elvis Costello's a hell of a rocker. He's good. And he tweeted in response to this and said, "This is fine by me. It's how rock and roll works, and we will not be seeking writing credit." What a cool dude. Come on. And there were others. Adam Levine stepped up and, offered some defense to Olivia Rodrigo, which is great. So now, as a result, these interpolations have proven costly for Rodrigo. Although most of the album was written by Rodrigo and co-writer, producer Daniel Nigra. Listen, so she's a singer, songwriter, and can perform music because she can also piano. She can also, if I'm correct, I think, what is it? So I know she plays piano, she can sing, and she can songwrite. That's the perfect mix. I mean, okay, pop star, yeah, pick it as you want. Okay, very popular, wide mass appeal, but the songs for what they're worth. I like the value of the songs. I like the production behind the songs. I think Rodrigo Nigra did very well. So in the case of Good For You, Haley Williams and Joshua Farrow, they're going to be receiving now 50% of the royalties for that. Now they're going to get that, and then Rodrigo Nigra will have 50% of the ownership of that composition. The single to date for Good For You has generated $2.4 million in global publishing royalties, Billboard estimates, accounting for streaming, sales, and some airplay activities from MRC Data, who does the chart aggregation for Billboard's Hot 100 and all their charts. But excluding synchronization payments, radio airplay from outside the U.S., and general licensing. So Williams and Farrell are still getting $1.2 million in royalties so far for Good For You. And 50-50 split. All the addition of Williams and Farrell was retroactive. Sources say the Paramore team had him in touch with Rodrigo about the single prior to its release. So even before the song came out, this is not, getting caught with the pants down and saying, okay, you need to correct this. So she was actually working to make sure that even though her songs might have had some influence, might have had some sounds that might have some similarities if they went to court, but it sounds like they were actually working on it. Her song Deja Vu, which earned at least $1.3 million in worldwide publishing, 1.26 was made in the U.S. Billboard estimates Taylor Swift's writing team was retroactively granted 50% of the writing credit. Swift has 25%. Antonoff has 20%. And Clark has 5% for the interpolation of their work on Cruel Summer. And it turns out to be at least over $325,000 for Swift, $260,000 for Antonoff, $65,000 for Clark. I forget who was part of that whole mix, but Rodrigo Nigra split 50% of the royalties equally and pocketing about $600,000. Listen, they're making millions of dollars. Now, I don't know how much is going necessarily. Now, that's the songwriting. By the way, that's the other thing, too. Keep this in mind. So there's the albums being sold, of which, as a performer, she's only going to get what she gets in the advance for the record and what she does for the music. So like if it was somebody else writing it, yeah, she's not going to make much off the record and all that, right? So what she's making money off of will eventually be the touring and the songwriting royalties, because that's where she's going to get her best cut. And if somebody else decides to go and use that song themselves, they're going to have to pay her in Nigro, which makes sense. Now, one step forward, three steps back hasn't reached the same level of the success of other two singles. It's still earned quite a bit in publishing royalties. And it's one of the few that Rodrigo solely wrote herself. But after sharing credit, she holds a third of the composition ownership. Swift holds a third, Antonoff a third. So far, they each have earned $86,000 for the song's publishing. So that's about $2 million that Rodrigo and Daniel Nigro have given up because of this interpolation. But people are saying that's not enough. Okay? Now, here's the difference. So Rodrigo has possibly avoided much more costly copyright infringement lawsuits with some of the biggest names in music. And this is the reason why this was important. In terms of what Olivia Rodrigo and Daniel Nigro and her team did, they did what was right. What was right to make sure that nobody was going to come back with lawsuits. So everything else right now is just social media backlash, just for the sake of backlash. But the reason that's more important, it's business when it's at the end of the day. So the one thing that's got to be said about interpolation, that is the benchmark for what you don't want to be doing, is what Robin Thicke, which basically ruined his career. So his song Blurred Lines, it resulted in a penalty of $7.3 million, later reduced to $5 million, which was paid to the estate of Marvin Gaye for the interpolation of Got to Give It Up, the highest judgment for a copyright infringement case involving music in history. It's been the impetus, they say in Billboard, for many artists and writers in the last few years to settle disputes out of court. Bam. So she did this, and it was very important to make sure that, you know, to have this story come about and to make sure that she didn't get caught up in anything bad. That's pretty admirable, even if you don't think you're not. So she did that, and there we go. So good for you. And the interpolation to Paramore's single Misery Business, there you got that. And as we said, Taylor Swift, Jack Antonoff, St. Vincent, a.k.a. Annie Clark, credits for Deja Vu, based on the song Cruel Summer. Same thing with one step forward, three steps back. And as far as I know, it looks like that Taylor Swift and Olivia Rodrigo are doing just fine. Hey, you know, because of Taylor being an inspiration to her, which she has said in many interviews, hey, Taylor Swift just made some bucks off of it. So, like, you know what? I mean, you can't do bad with that. And Billboard said everything. So people said it wasn't a big deal. Now, Adam Levine, I made mention of, he said he defended the accusations against Rodrigo of copying other artists, explained that it was a gray area in the music industry. And I'm going to bring that up in a second and see what he says. So here's what he actually said. Quote, "These are tricky things that anyone who's ever written a song knows that you rip something off inadvertently and it makes it to tape and then it's released and then there's a lawsuit. It's a natural thing for it to happen. And sometimes it gets ugly and sometimes it's warranted that people take legal action. Sometimes it's not warranted that people take legal action. And I think there's definitely something becoming more of a gray area that's reared its ugly head these days. I do think that we should probably meet this with a little more compassion and understanding and trying to find a way. All this calling out, it's like music is a creative thing. I just hate to see it crushed." Exactly right. And I'm glad he decided to say that. That's pretty cool of him. So she's getting some good defense from the likes of Adam Levine and Elvis Costello. Like, listen, those two have done very well in music for them, however you like to say it, and they said it. And it's pretty cool saying that. And so that's the whole story. The context is there. She's a new artist. She's just getting started. Like, the fact that this is all happening to her now and a little bit of a shutdown already, it's like, that does suck. Because why are you going to take that young girl down? For what? What good does it do to go ahead and take this attack to her and try to go ahead and cut the legs off from her after an album does very well? Listen, there's a lot of jealousy out there because there are artists that they work so hard to get on that Billboard Hot 100 or just to get songs through streaming, through SoundCloud, whatever. CD Baby, pick it. And yeah, listen, she did have quite a bit of help to get where she is. So have others, okay? You want to say something about Kid Laroi, and his association with Juice WRLD to be able to get up, and also some of the nepotism that goes up. CJ also with nepotism. You want to say more about, there's a thought process about how certain Justin Bieber getting noticed by Usher, all these things that happen, right? Everybody gets found some way, and sometimes you just get crowned and then you get noticed. Michael Jackson and Diana Ross, you just think about it. Some artists just get the luck of getting coordinated and like, okay, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to bring you up. And there might be things that they do with certain records that they put out, even early on, that might have some similarities, okay? Are we going to go after... We're going to go after Leif Garrett for doing I Was Made for Dancing, the Do Run Run, and all this kind of stuff. Are we going to go after him for putting out an initial album that had just covers on it? Right? That's a very old reference. I know. Sorry about that. I'm trying to think of newer ones, but I can't think of it right now. Well, okay. Tiffany in the 80s. I Think We're Alone Now. That was a previous song, got covered. And, the royalties coming off of that. But here in the area of social media and the chance to go and attack somebody just becoming the new darling, a new star, and the jealousy and the vitriol, because some people in this generation now, of her generation, they feel like, well, they should all get Hot 100 number ones. They should all get gold albums, right? That's the whole idea. It is going back to what we would talk about 20 years ago. Oh, look at these kids with the participation trophies. Yeah, that group has grown up. And now they're her age. And now they're all complaining about this. No surprise. And it's also the fact that some artists don't realize, hey, this has been going on for years. So you do the right thing to make sure, just like Adam Levine says, tricky things, anybody who's ever done it, you could rip off something inadvertently. You could inadvertently plagiarize. So, yeah, that's extremely important. We want to make sure that artists, if they are using something that is kind of interpolated or sampled or mixed or just covered, yes, proper royalties go to the songwriters, go to the publishers. Agreed. That is totally justified. But to try to go ahead and find every little thing to go ahead and pick on this young girl and what she's done, it's not justified. That's the part I have a problem with. The ostracization. And that was the best word because I was looking for alliteration, and I decided to use the word ostracized because I thought that was a good way of putting it. Excluding from a group by common consent. So among pop culture, among the masses, she's now become this darling pop star that is just through the moon this year. She will probably win Grammys coming to the next Grammy Award show. I mean, she's going to do a lot. Music awards are going to have her. She's going to getting a lot of awards for what she's doing right now. Best new artist, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely. And she'll get out there more, and she'll get on tour, and more people get to watch her and see her live and, buy her merchandise and do whatever. And her fan base is going to grow. She's got so many stands out there, I'm sure, that are probably defending to help. But then there are those that are going to ostracize her and go after her. And that's just not fair. So that's something that kind of bothered me, and good to bring this up. It's one of those things that you also have to keep in mind if you are going to be a aspiring musician, that if you are, if you can try to create something organic, it's kind of hard because, some rock music is like the same three chords, right? Or some music you've heard love songs, and how can you go ahead and make another love song that just sounds different? Or music altogether? Like, it is kind of tough. I actually thought about that. I was walking around the mall today, and I look at, what people are looking at when it comes to, like, what's the fashion, what's the trends, what are people into, right? Things change in the trends about what people like to eat, what people like to drink, some stores that people go to. But in some cases, there are things when it comes to fashion and beauty and, everyday just things like technology constantly changes. But there's certain things that just stay the same, or there's really not much that can be changed. And entertainment, it's getting to a point where you have to go outside of the mainstream into the counterculture to find things that are different. Like if you go to Spencer's Gifts, that's always something that you look at that always has kind of trendy stuff. And when you look in the store, I go and pass by Spencer Gifts all the time. They always have merchandise that goes towards something. So like if it's Rick and Morty, it's in front, or Shonen Jump, or, whatever, My Hero Academia, or Sword Art Online, or, Dragon Ball Z, or whatever. There's all these things that the kids are all into now. But it's not like the clothing is different. It's just what's on the screen to you. Or is there anything that women are doing right now in terms of what's, being worn? Like, there's not like any new fashions or any new trends that are being created, really. Sometimes it's just, going back to something that worked, that was popular. And that's the other thing, is that we just see trends coming back instead of trends being brand spanking new. It's kind of hard to do that. If we see trends at all, like TikTok, the milk crate challenge, which kind of just got put down the wayside, right? Or, whatever. Like, there's things and then some trends are based on something old, something nostalgic. That's the other thing. Like on TikTok right now, hey, every girl right now is kind of swirling around in a circle to Let's Groove by Earth, Wind, and Fire. Like, it does groove, dun, 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 it's all right, all right. Like, right, they're all doing that part, and they're playing the song a little bit slower, right? And there's things that just, they don't really change. They just stay the same, or they just go back to something that worked. Which is why we're not seeing so much change when it comes to movies. We just see a lot of remakes and rehashes and universes being used, and we're just going to continue to move along and say what we're going to say. All right, so Top Gun Maverick, Mission Impossible 7, the releases have been delayed amid the Delta surge. So 2 movies that Tom Cruise would be is the lead star in. Amid a surge of the Delta variant in COVID-19, those movies have now been delayed. Top Gun Maverick will now release Memorial Day weekend 2022 instead of Thanksgiving Day. I think that's probably, it's fine. I think it's not going to be a bad thing to have that there. Now, Mission Impossible 7, which would have debuted Memorial Day weekend of 2022, now that they're moving that, they don't want to have Tom Cruise have 2 movies out. That movie now moves to September 30th. So right at the start of the fall, after Labor Day. Okay, that sounds good. Jackass Forever, they had promos, they had trailers playing for it. They were going to put it out there. It was supposed to go out October 22nd. Now it moves to the dead time, February 4th of next year. So this year, we hadn't had any movies that were really being moved around, but this is the first time we're seeing it. And so far, research has been conducted by NRG. 67% of moviegoers are very or somewhat comfortable visiting their local theater. And that's down 11% from July. Family audiences, 58% of the parents are very or somewhat comfortable taking their kids to the movies. But remember, how many people are going to the movies right now where you can go watch it at home? Like, Suicide Squad, or want to watch Wonder Woman, or whatever there is. There's a lot of movies that are being put out through Netflix and Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus. Like, you really don't have to leave the house. So some people are taking the option of doing that, because obviously Black Widow made a lot of money on Disney Plus, and people decided, hey, we're going to watch it at home, because that's what they decided to do. Now, minutes after Top Gun Maverick moved out of Thanksgiving weekend, smart people, Sony, and the Ghostbusters postquel, The Afterlife, it moved out of November 11th to move down to Thanksgiving Day weekend. So now it's November 19th, or it's somewhere around there. So some people are saying Top Gun moving away to next year, it's a big blow. Listen, Ghostbusters is probably going to do pretty well. There's not a lot of movies that are going to be out Thanksgiving weekend, but the Christmas movies are still in place. And let's go with the movies that are still left this year. There's still some big movies left to come out. So Universal's musical adaptation of Dear Evan Hansen opens September 24th. No Time to Die, the latest James Bond sequel, is launching October 8th. Sony's Venom, Let There Be Carnage, is bowing October 15th. Disney and Marvel's Eternals is dated for November 5th. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is out this weekend. I'll be watching that. Then also, Christmas week, or in December, Steven Spielberg's adaptation of West Side Story is December 10th. Matrix 4, December 22nd. And also, don't forget, Dune is also coming out. And I forget what else it comes out that weekend on Christmas week. But there's still movies to watch. And there's still movies out for release. So that's not going to go away. It's not changing. Not yet. So other movies they still have left to come up. Malignant comes out next weekend. Addams Family 2 is October 1st. The Last Duel is October 15th. American Underdog, the Kurt Warner story, December 25th. And to start off the movie season next year, Paramount's Scream. They brought that franchise back. Oh, well. Here we go. Now, with that said, what's next for film releases? Variety has done quite a bit of writing about that. So they talked about the story and as it happened, and then they followed up on it. Rebecca Rubin writes, with all these movies, all of which plan to have exclusive theatrical releases, debut in cinemas as expected, or will their respective studios again push them further into the future? So there's a domino effect that's being felt right now, just like it was at the start of COVID-19. The latest retreat may derail any hope the movie theater industry would recover by the year's end. It's still going to do better, okay? Anything's going to do better than 2020. Pretty sure of that. I don't know what the numbers look like, but hey, I mean, of the movies that came out this year, let me pull up the story real quick, thenumbers.com, the-numbers.com, to look at what we have in the box office this year and what it's done so far. 2021 domestic, listen, you can't go wrong with some of these numbers. When it comes to opening weekends, Black Widow still did best, $80 million and 4,200 theaters. Plus, don't forget what you also had going on with what was being on Disney+. F9, $70 million opening weekend. Quiet Place, $47 million. Jungle Cruise, $35 million. Godzilla vs. Kong, $32 million. And Godzilla vs. Kong was the first one, the real big blockbuster to come out of the gate. Back, I think it was in May, which was also on HBO Max. And even when it was on HBO Max, that movie still pulled $100 million domestically. There you go. And overall, if you want to go through the whole thing, worldwide, almost $500 million. Now, it could have done better, but that's pretty damn good. And then you look, okay, $180 million for Black Widow. It could have been more. But we know that Disney Plus took a bit of the chunk. $370 million box office worldwide so far for Black Widow. It's pretty damn good still. All right? It could have been better. But movies were making money. Like, we have the top 5 movies this year that did bank over $100 million. Jungle Cruise has broken $100 million domestically. Quiet Place broke $100 million, 160. Fast 9, F9, $172 million. And there was movies that also, that also stayed up above $50 million in the same way. Like, that's pretty damn good. There were movies making money and a lot of theaters that are open, as a matter of fact. Black Widow F9 getting the most amount of movies, but then you're seeing a lot of movies among the top 10 highest grossing movies this year. They were able to get over 3,000 screens, which is a good chunk of the country. The representatives for Sony, MGM, Disney, Universal, and Warner Brothers declined to comment or denied any more delays. Box office expert predicted Top Gun Maverick may not be the only film to relinquish its spot in 2021. There's not many others to give up. I don't think so. But for now, many high-profile films remain on the schedule. Other ones that still are on the books. Many States in Newark. The Sopranos prequel is October 1st. Halloween Kills is October 15th. Warner Brothers reimagining of Dune, I mentioned, is October 22nd. Now, if I read something, I think there was also the thing that was being said that Spider-Man's Far From Home and Venom were the two movies that could be pushed back depending on how things go. If Shang-Chi and the Legend of Ten Rings hits a good number, like if that hits like 70 million or so, or more than that, then you know what? I'm guessing that Spider-Man and Venom will stay on the schedule. Because it's not so much where the COVID scare is making people to stay away from the theaters. It's that there's going to be money made. So the movie theaters, I don't think they're looking at it. They are taking into account COVID. I'm sure that's one thing. But it's probably what they're going with that. Now, there is good news, they say, for cinema operators. So since Warner Brothers is putting its entire slate of movies simultaneous on HBO Max, the studio is unlikely to shift around release dates for its upcoming films. So the movies that they still have that are coming up are not going to go anywhere else because they're already going to put them out on HBO Max. That includes King Richard with Will Smith on November 19th and Clint Eastwood's Western drama Cry Macho September 17th. Now, one of the movies they think is going to be tough is that No Time to Die might have to move another time. Because when did they push it back? It was originally April 2020, then pushed to, I think it was November. Then it got pushed back again. Or then it got pushed back. But it was already pushed back like 3 times already. Like it was crazy. And I get it. Like they pushed it back in 2019 before the pandemic. They pushed it 2 more times since. So veteran producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson have unprecedented control over the film franchise and are unlikely to allow the 007 adventure to debut simultaneously on streaming platforms, cushioning the blow from the pre-ticket sales. So they would keep the 25th installment of this long-running British spy theater series in theaters, at least at a time when audiences have expressed increased apprehension about going to the movies, remaining risky because Bond entries are enormously expensive undertakings and need to generate hundreds of millions of dollars in the hopes of breaking even. Now, Daniel Craig's last screen outing was Spectre in 2015. So it's been a while since we'd seen a Bond movie come out. $880 million globally. 2012 Skyfall, which was fantastic, $1.1 billion. So for only one movie has been able to clear that $500 million mark. That was F9 Fast Saga. For No Time to Die, if they don't make that mark, it would be catastrophic. But the film is still keeping its October 8th date. Now, here's some of the analysis about the other movies and how they should do for the rest of the year. Sony's slate, particularly Venom, Let There Be Carnage, appears to be equally unstable. Sony's the only major studio that hasn't had its own streaming service, so they spent much of the pandemic licensing its movies to digital players like Netflix and Amazon. Now, Venom, the original, made $650 million of its $856 million from the international box office. Now, the sequel will probably struggle to make those kind of sales anyway. And who knows how well it's going to do in a sequel. You got to keep that in mind as well. Which nobody ever thinks about the fact that all these movies are sequels. Like, how well are they going to go and do against the original counterpart? Their first showing, the first time this universe is exposed. Like, you got to think about that. Hollywood movies have not been granted release dates in China because they have not been given release dates. Ghostbusters Afterlife, which comes 3 decades of the original, could be relocated from late November into next year with little impact. The hope is that, like December, when Tom Holland reprises his role in Spider-Man No Way Home, the box office will be more stable and parents will feel comfortable taking the family to the local multiplex. By the way, with all the things they were promoting in this movie, knowing that the original 3 villains are all coming back for this Spider-Man, I mean, there's a lot of push about this movie. I don't think the Marvel Universe, the fandom, wants to wait for this movie to get pushed back because there's a whole lot of anticipation. And Christmas is going to be a great time for it. So they think maybe in 3 months things will kind of settle down. So when it comes to the other big comic book property, sources say Disney has 2 to 3 weeks to make a decision about plans for Eternals, their Marvel movie directed by Oscar winner Chloe Zhao and starring Angelina Jolie, Gemma Chan, Kit Harington, Richard Madden, and Kamal Najani. The studio has been curiously vague about whether or not the movie will play exclusively in theaters or have a hybrid release like Disney Plus, like Black Widow did. Across the industry, Shang-Chi will be closely examined this weekend to see how the blockbuster hopeful performs on the big screen. So if you want movies to be out there, then damn it, go see Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi, excuse me. Yeah, you want to help the movie industry. You want to help the movies do well. Spread the word. Make them go see Shang-Chi and Legend of the Ten Rings. It's a Marvel movie. It's going to be good. It looks really good. I will be there tomorrow, okay? Early tracking indicates it started around $45 to $50 million in its first 3 days release, which would set a Labor Day weekend, but would rank as the lowest debut ever for a Marvel movie. But putting Black Widow concurrently on Disney Plus, which resulted in a plenty of drama and a steep second week decline, could have been avoided with exclusive theatrical window for Eternals. But now, that's what happened there. So the Marvel movies, to have one that's going to be exclusively in theaters first before it goes to streaming, the traditional model, and how well it does, they're going to be able to say that with Black Widow, the decline was there because people could go watch it on Disney Plus or find a pirate copy. But Shang-Chi is not going to have that. So let's see what happens here. People are going to want to go to the movies to go see that movie, and it will have time to continue to get people over, whether it's Labor Day weekend or the weekends after. With Top Gun, Maverick, and Jackass Forever being pushed back, Paramount doesn't have any movies coming out until Scream in January 14th, 2022. And so the only movie they have left is Paw Patrol, which comes up later this year. And Universal Studios forging a deal with movie theater owners last year to shorten the theatrical window, bringing movies more quickly to the home. One of its upcoming films includes Sing 2, in addition to Halloween Kills and Dear Evan Hansen, following the release pattern of Boss Baby Family Business, which appeared simultaneously in theaters and on Peacock. But for the most part, Universal's pact with chains like AMC and Cinemark have given it enough of a cushion if box office revenues fall short. So that's all interesting right there. It's good stuff that they already put together. Hey, let's hope for the movies to do well. Like I said, I've been reading about the fact that they want that Shang-Chi, I think I finally said it right, is the movie that's going to keep the movie industry flowing and flourishing and doing better than last year and showing that the movie theaters are relevant and important and people need to come back out to them like myself. Let's hope for the best. Crossing fingers, crossing toes, literally doing that as I record. So that's got to be considered. So let's move along now into journalism, because that's a bit of a direction that is taking some changes. Vice Media, one of the groups that's really going on a lot of issues. It's a struggling media company, owns a lot of different publications online. They had been in talks to going with a blank check company, a SPAC, Special Purpose Acquisition Company, but now they got themselves funded. They have raised $85 million from existing investors. And the co-founder, Shane Smith, will now give up his voting control. The goal is now to get Vice Media profitable. So originally, we're going to go public through a merger with a SPAC funded by 7GC and Company, but existing investors like James Murdoch's Lupus Systems and Sixth Street Partners have agreed to invest in the company to help it achieve profitability now. That's good for them. This comes a week after Vice Media engaged in another round of layoffs, letting go fewer than 20 people who worked in the company's editorial division. And there are things that are actually definitely praising that's being said right now from Chief Digital Officer Corey Hake from Vice, that the growth period of the last 2 years, they have getting a global editorial alignment. YouTube account for them is 14 million subscribers, breaking all-time monthly view records in May. Traffic to Refinery 29's Unbothered, the digital community for black women, has risen over 40% year to year. So they're finding things, but they got to be able to make money. But the news is starting to change things. And Neiman Lab, who I've not talked about in a while, actually put out a story talking about the way we consume news now since the pandemic. Now, I think during the pandemic, I really had a come to Jesus moment about journalism. Sure, the political season did not help matters. COVID did not help at all. But it's obvious that news is money making, and the information that's out there is just not the same anymore. I mean, I can find out about news from people commenting or find stories that are out there that give me the whole context where I don't need to learn about the story right then and there. Eventually, it's going to trickle down to where I will find somebody commenting on it, which will make me say, okay, let me take a look at what this is. and I'll find a headline, I'll find a little blurb about it, and I'll find out what I need to know. Because trying to go through and look for stories and look through the headlines, the body of the story, and look for the information that matters by going through all the other crap that's being put in there, whether it's political narratives, whether it's, positions that are being put out there, and kind of fluff that's being put out. Opinions and editorials by the publishers themselves or the writers themselves, putting their own agenda into the story instead of actually reporting on it. So the who, what, when, where, and why, I hampered for that for years in this program. I've given up. I've come to grips with the fact that it's not going to be like that anymore. And I complained about it, and I was worried about it. But yeah, we are at a point where that kind of journalism is out there somewhere, but you do have to change the way you watch your news or consume it. News should not be as important as it once was. There's better things to be worrying about. Absolutely keep yourself informed, but the way you keep yourself informed, change it up. I mean, cable TV, useless. Cable news is useless. Quite a few newspapers are useless. Because remember, if you're buying newspapers, how many stories are being done by said newspaper? By the actual people that are working in the newspaper, in the building, locally. Same thing with local news. How many stories are you seeing that are being done by reporters with a mic flag of their station? Not much anymore, is there? Like really, when you look at it, your local TV news, how important is the news that they're giving you that you couldn't get for the national news or for something else? And you have to think about that. So the story is how the pandemic sort of changed the way we consume news, plus what makes journalism truly valuable for people, news fatigue and repetition, and how the movement of contributors reveals political polarization in the media. Now, here's a story that comes from Mark Coddington and Seth Lewis. Now, COVID-19 and a new perspective on news avoidance. From the moment the pandemic hit full force in March 2020, it was clear that its seemingly all-encompassing magnitude was having a seismic impact on many people's news consumption habits. Conversations on and off routinely included discussions of how we were unplugging from the news or being sucked into more deeply than ever. A new word came in, doom scrolling, to capture the mesmerizing control intake of fear and despair-inducing news on our devices. That continues today, and that trend is not going away. That's what's going on. The pandemic bores on, but the implications of that initial shift remains cloudy. How do we fit what happened to news consumption over the past year and a half into what we've known about it for the past several decades? So 2 studies published this summer looked at those questions. Dutch scholars Marcel Boersma and Joel Swart were interested in the formation of news habits. Now, they wanted to find out whether a major disruption to everyday life could change news habits or form new ones, and what factors could help determine whether that happened. They used an open-ended questionnaire of 1,293 Dutch news users during April and May 2020 and conducted 22 follow-up interviews later that summer and fall. So they found 5 groups based on the responses. 2 reduced news consumption, stable news avoiders, and followers turned avoiders. Followers turned avoiders, initially using more news than avoiding it based on the emotional weight and feeling of helplessness it produced. 2 increased news consumption, frequent news users, and news junkies, adding new routines that lasted at least a couple of months. So what determined each? They were several interconnected factors, led by the degree to which the pandemic affected their everyday routines. So for those whom the pandemic continued to obtrusively affect their daily lives, they were more likely to develop new, increased news habits. Social context also had an effect. Those were friends and family discussing the pandemic more often were more likely to stick with new news habits. And emotions playing a role too. So when things were starting to be changed around you, and you felt the restriction, you felt the quarantine, you felt the social distancing, the people wearing masks everywhere, all these things, it's just triggering back, kind of traumatizing you, trying to go back and talk about, oh, look what's happening right to us. You know what I mean? it's basically, it is kind of like, it's like almost like an emotional assault. Like, really, it is like attacking us, manipulation, and creating fear. And people getting triggered all the time by having verbal or nonverbal cues or visual cues that continuously made them have to feel like they have to stick to the news and calm their fears and hope that the fears will be quelled because of what the news would tell them. They were hoping the news would make them feel better. Instead, the news made them more scared, more nervous, and more afraid, in fear of their lives, changing them altogether. Doesn't matter the politics of this. It's control. It's what it is. Emotions played a major role too. Pandemic-induced anxiety led to both less and more news consumption in different cases. And emotional investment in the news more generally led to new habits. Yeah, so some people now are stuck to watching the news because now they're just in an emotional state of fear and anxiety and depression induced by the news media. They don't care how they get the news to you. They want you in a state of shock, anger, a loss of emotional control, and anxious and depressed. That's what they want you to feel. The news is giving off negative energy to you. It is harming people's minds. It's hurting people's lives. Another study from Norwegian scholars Britta Itre-Arne and Halvard Moe, I probably butchered those names, dug into patterns of news avoidance prompted by the pandemic and its interplay with news consumption. They did a questionnaire to 550 Norwegian news users, March-April 2020. They found an overall pattern that resembled followers turned avoiders, a brief period of intensified monitoring of COVID-19 news that simply couldn't be sustained, prompting both information overload and emotional drain. Now that study makes sense. Yeah, too much. You were taking advantage. It's like a disaster. We're going to play up the disaster. We're going to play up, it's like a movie. It's like a soap opera. Can we keep you in suspense? Can we keep you scared, locked in your homes with the comfort of the TV screen watching the news? Of these people you feel like you could trust, that you could believe in. Do you really feel like that was really worth it? So these studies challenge the notion that news avoidance is necessarily problematic, arguing that it's a thoughtful, strategic part of news consumption more broadly, not its irresponsible or anti-democratic opposite. Well, I don't worry about anti-democratic, but it is irresponsible. Anybody that thinks it's thoughtful and strategic, yeah, for money making, sure. But is that helping the actual public that's watching? Your viewers? No, not at all. I think there is information that can be brought out there. It's not as if some information is not important. But that information overload and the constant beating over the head, be scared, all of that. And I'm not even talking about vaccinations and all that. I'm not even bringing that up. I'm talking about that the pandemic has to be overcoming and overtaking all of your lives. You cannot be next to your families. You can't do anything. You can't go anywhere. The news is telling you, like a really strict parent, making you suffer from Stockholm syndrome. You have to be stuck at home. You're imprisoned because the news tells you to. And the news doesn't care about how long this pandemic lasts. They don't care how many people die or get diagnosed from it. They're more than happy to report on it. They're more than happy to find the isolated cases of people that lives are ruined by disasters or whatever, because they don't care about you. That's mainstream media. That's corporate media. And those outlets that are corporate or controlled with a different narrative. There are still good grassroots local journalists out there, investigative journalists that are getting crowdfunded. There are still journalists out there. There are still people doing the right thing out there, trying to get the word out, trying to get real information, and trying to keep people at a sense of getting reasonable information. But nobody's being reasonable here. There's money to be made. And we're going to do this as long as we can, because if we didn't have the pandemic, all these news organizations would be dying. They'll be falling off the vine. They will be irrelevant, and the digital disruption would have destroyed them. They're profiting off a disaster. They're profiting off of chaos. You tell me if I'm wrong. Just saying. There's a lot more to be said about this, and maybe I'm going to hold on to the story and come back to it again if I want to have some time, focus a little bit more. That might be something I will do. So I'll table this. If I want to come back to it, there's probably more to come into it about what the studies are saying, because it might be a good thing to go into if I need something else to kind of bring up. But I'll hold on to this for later. We'll do that. A few other stories I want to bring up here real quick. I'm not going to have time for it, but I want to go to the Nielsen Ratings and the issue that's been going on right now. They're accreditation. It's like, Moody's accrediting like a bank and, saying, well, your credit rating has gone down. So the National Ratings Accreditation has been suspended by the Media Rating Council. So the old record of measuring the TV business has been dealt a serious blow, because now this industry organization decided to suspend its backing of the company's national rating service and canceled an agreed-upon hiatus for support of local TV efforts for Nielsen's ratings as well. The idea is that TV industry needs a new yardstick, a new way to do metrics. The TV networks, eager to demonstrate to Madison Avenue that they still have clout with viewers who are moving the streaming outlets, alleged earlier this year that Nielsen has changed the protocols during the coronavirus pandemic, resulting in an undercounting of the TV audience. And Nielsen has pledged to rectify the matter, but they're still sampling. They're not doing the right cost, but there is no metrics that are out there that are completely accurate. It's not happening. So the MRC, Media Research Council, determined Nielsen likely undercounted TV audiences in February of this year, indicated last month they intend to seek a hiatus for national ratings so it can work to upgrade them with less public scrutiny. Nielsen's desire for such a pause, however, has been denied. Quote, while we are disappointed that the situation has come to this, we believe these are the proper actions of the Media Research Council to take at this time, the Executive Director and CEO, George Ivey, said. So the decision will affect Nielsen ratings starting in mid-September. While the company's measurement will still be utilized, it will, for an undetermined period of time, operate without a seal of approval that the industry uses for it. And that would give advertisers and TV networks impetus to seek alternate means of counting their audiences. So because those ratings don't mean shit, advertisers might start dropping off of inventory because it's like, oh, well, you don't have the ratings that actually matter. You're not getting accredited ratings. You're not getting ratings that are meeting a certain standard of compliance. So we're going to pull our ads. We're not going to do any of this. We're not going to be part of this. That's a big problem for television, for your mainstream television, to not be able to go and show, hey, here's our ratings. What would happen if radio got that? Ooh, that would be scary. About as scary as the news, right? Okay, there's much more I could bring up, but I'm going to probably just table it to next week. I still had the Great Rekindling. It's a lot of radio news I still had that I wanted to bring up, but I can pull that off for next week. And we'll take all that and kind of table it over, because there was just so much to get into. Good stuff this week on the show. Thank you for listening in, finding the show as you always do, subscribing to it. And, if you like what I've been doing with the tweaking of the show and what I've been putting in here, please go ahead and hit me up on the YouTube. Please feel free to comment there. I put all the shows up on YouTube, youtube.com/JBRASCO951. You can check for it there. And of course, I'm all through the social media when it comes to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, at King of Podcasts. And I do different stuff on there. Like I have a Podcasting 101 series. If you want to learn podcasting tips from yours truly, I'm putting them now exclusively on Instagram and TikTok. I got about 12 episodes up there, and I got a few more to go and put up. And, there's ideas I want to keep bringing up and things I want to go and talk about. So I'll do that as well. And until next week, remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands. Thank you for listening to the Broadcasters Podcast. Find all the links to subscribe to the show by going to broadcasterspodcast.com. And don't forget to check out the King of Podcasts wrestling program, the Wrestling is Real podcast, exclusively at wrestlingisreal.com.